Okay, so I was talking just a second ago with Dean about my weekend, and I did want to share just a situation with you guys, get your input, get your thoughts about it. We did the Friday and Saturday night on a college campus there in Harrison, Arkansas. They'd rented out an amphitheater kind of room. Had probably 400 folks or so, which for that particular community was really, really good. A lot of people from the community. Had several folks who identified themselves as atheists there. I talked to two of them Friday night, and they obviously had some questions, some things that they wanted to talk about. And in the course of our discussion, I challenged them. I said, hey, if you'll come back tomorrow night, I'll give you a book, complimentary copy, because I want you to listen to what I'm going to teach on tomorrow. And so they did. They agreed to come back, and they did. Gave the wife a copy of it, and by the end of the second hour, she was basically in tears. She had a whole long strand of notes. After we were all done, I went up to her. I said, hey, love to see you tomorrow. The seminar continues at the Church of Christ here in town. She said, I really want to go. And the husband walks up, very upset, visibly upset, and said, I can't be there. I'm not going. I don't know about you. And basically turned on his heel and walked away. Obviously, in that household, there was some division of belief system. How would you handle something like that? Silence would not be the right answer.
I've got no idea.
I'd encourage her to come. And just tell her, it's just one of the costs we have to count when we come to Jesus. You got to count the costs, and He's got to be number one. And then after you teach her, you can always show her how to teach him through her, nice and meek and quiet spirit. I mean, I would invite her to come.
I thought it was very interesting that once you boiled down to evidence, it was obvious she was willing to kind of look at evidence. He was more wrapped up in the emotion. And when you cleared the emotion side out of the argument out of the way, he didn't have a whole lot to stand on. And I think she recognized that and kind of recognized that it had become that atheism was basically his religion. Yeah, John?
So he turned about face and walked away from you. Did you still continue on with the conversation with her?
A little bit, yeah. At that point I had a lot of people around me down front, but I challenged her. I said, I really do hope you'll be there. I told her what the lesson was going to be about and why I thought it was going to be important to her.
Right.
So, and here's one of those things. It's a learning lesson. There was another set of atheists who I didn't get a chance to talk to one-on-one. I did see them, and they were out in the lobby, and there were two Christians that were talking to him, approaching him. One of the Christian ladies just absolutely was verbally abusive to this couple. I mean, to the point of, just very, very ugly, talking down to them, you guys don't know anything, I don't even know, blah, 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 blah. Thankfully, there was another Christian there who's, realized what was going on and was basically like, what are you doing? We're supposed to be reaching out to these people. And the Christian's response was, well, aren't we supposed to beat them in this fight?
Wow.
So how would you handle that one? And the reason I throw this out, I've gotten an email back from the other Christian, the one that was there to kind of witness this whole thing, basically saying, look, I think we handled it wrong. I want to try to communicate with these people. I want to see if I can get their information. Can we send them some books or whatever? How would you handle that situation? Yeah, Dean?
Well, she's not entirely wrong in saying that it's a battle or a fight or anything like that, but there are certain rules of engagement that she's got to follow. And those rules of engagement are just the way that the Bible talks about season your words as if with salt. Mm-hmm. And she obviously didn't do that. So what so much to do is go to her and say, listen, you're right that there's a fight here going on, but there's certain, quote, rules of engagement that you have to follow, and one of those is how you speak and engage with people, because by verbally attacking them, she's just turning them off to the gospel.
Absolutely. Yeah, John?
I'd probably also want to go immediately to the person that she was verbally abusing, because you may not, you probably, if you don't go to them immediately and try to remedy that situation right then and there, you're going to lose them. Whereas the Christian who's doing who's offending and doing the wrong, you can deal with them a little bit later after the fact. But definitely need to go in and do some quick maintenance there, so to speak, with that.
Yeah, because you and I, all of us realize, I hope, that there have been lots and lots of people who have turned away from Christendom simply because of conversations just like that. It will probably happen to you all. You know, it may be a situation where somebody comments on somebody's clothing in a lobby, or somebody comments on somebody's children. You don't know how many people have been offended and upset by somebody simply saying, you know, you can take your children to a nursery.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden that mom or dad gets very, very, very offended by that. Kind of a, are you questioning my ability to parent kind of situation. When in all honesty, the Christian may have simply been saying, hey, we got one, it's over here if you want it. But sometimes it comes across as, hey, why'd you leave your crying, screaming child out in the worship service the entire time?
Right.
So, all right, we left off on Tuesday with the existence of God. And you guys obviously know I was not around on Tuesday or Thursday. I appreciate your patience with that. I want us to pick back up, and I want to talk a little bit about... We've looked at things like the cosmological argument. We've looked at the anthropological argument, the teleological argument. Somebody give me a real quick review. What are those, and how do we use them? Those three arguments in particular.
Okay.
What is the cosmological argument, if you had to sum it up to somebody? Yeah.
Cause and effect.
Okay.
If you can look at something and say that it does exist, then you have to look back to where it came from.
Okay. What about the teleological argument? What is that?
Isn't that design?
Argument of design, absolutely. Anytime you got design, you must have a designer. And last but not least, anthropological argument. What is that?
Morals.
Morals. And what about morals?
If you have laws, there's a lawgiver. There has to be a lawgiver.
Absolutely. If morals exist, which we all agree they do, they had to come from somewhere. And so the question is, did they come from man or did they come from God? And what's the problem with me saying that ethics and morals arise from man? Yeah.
Everyone would have a different moral or a different ethic if it was up to them.
Absolutely. Who gets to pick what that standard is, ultimately, if you think about it? All right, what we're going to do now is I want us to review, and this is in the book, but I want us to kind of go through them, what I call 7 easy proofs of how to prove there's a God. And I will put this out on my iDisk site later today, actually. And let's see.
Brad, is that the same site we can get the PowerPoint?
Yes. Yes, it is. All right. Hopefully you guys can see that. Yes, no, maybe? No? Let's try again.
I saw a black screen for a minute. Did you guys get that up here too?
There we go. Wrong button. That should get it.
Oh, there we
There we go.
All right. Give me just a second to pull it right back up. Okay, there's proof number one. Every creation must have a creator. Hebrews chapter 3, verse 4, every house is built by someone, but he who built all things is God. Colossians 1:16, all things were created through him and for him. So if everything must have a creator, we know matter exists, where did it come from? Something can't come from nothing, something is or something exists, therefore something always was, that something is God. So proof number one, every creation must have a creator. Can anybody in there think of a exclusion to that? Is there any possible time that doesn't work?
No.
No. Okay. So what if an evolutionist says, well, you know, scientists are about to create matter from nothing? What do you say?
We know when it happens. Good luck.
Number one, you focus their attention on what? The fact that it has not happened yet.
Right, okay.
Okay? Because let's be honest, I can come up with all kinds of hypothetical experiments. But actually getting something accomplished is totally different than me saying, well, you know, over in Europe they're working on blah, 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 blah. Well, I'm sure somebody somewhere is probably working on having humans fly, but, you know, it ain't working yet. So, refocus the argument back to them and say, hey, have we ever seen a creation that didn't have some kind of a creator? And it's, guys, this one is so easy because you think about looking around the room, looking around where you are, everything around you was made by somebody or something. The second one, every design must have a designer. Again, this is tailoring off the teleological argument. Isaiah chapter 42, verse 5 says, thus God, the Lord, says, who created the heavens and stretched them out, who spread before the earth that which comes from it, who gives breath to the people on it, and spirit to those who walk on it. So again, we talked a little bit last time about designing the human body. I don't expect you guys as preachers of the gospel to learn every single aspect, you know, biologically speaking, of the human body, but I do think you would be very wise to bone up a little bit and to at least kind of have in your mind 2 or 3 things that you can say, hey, look, this is a great argument for design. What about this one? Proof number 3. Codes require somebody to program the code. What does that mean?
Wouldn't that be the, I guess, the information argument? If someone creates a computer, obviously we know computers have codes in them, therefore someone had to put the codes in the computer to get the computer to work.
Absolutely.
That's what we see in the cell.
Took us 13 years, hundreds of labs, hundreds of millions of dollars to unravel that code. Here is the analogy that I like to use. A fellow by the name of Carl Sagan, very well-known atheist astronomer, died several years ago. He made the comment, he said, if we ever find a code in space, that means there's intelligent life out there. So we are now looking for a code out in space. And yet, we call it the SETI program, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. So we're using all this money to look for this code out in space, and yet we have a code in every single cell of us called DNA. And yet they would say that that's not a code, that that's just chance or whatever. Number 4, every material effect must be an adequate cause that existed prior to it. You like my little frog? If I were to say this little frog caused a tsunami wave, let me back up. What would you say to that?
No.
No. No,
Didn't have enough
why?
mass. Didn't have enough mass to cause that effect.
Okay. That is not enough of a cause to make that effect. So the question is, all right, what caused the universe? Now, what happens when somebody says, wait a second, Eric, or wait a second, Jerry, what about God? How does he fit into this? Or what caused God? How would you answer that?
What caused God?
Yeah.
Is that the question?
Yes.
Well, if they were, well, you know, quite quote-unquote scientists and they're talking about matter, I just go back to the argument that God isn't matter. He's spirit. He's always existed.
Okay. So relook at that the law again for just a minute. This is the law of cause and effect.
Okay.
It says for every material effect, there must be an adequate cause that existed prior to it. You just said it. That is, God is a spirit. That says for every material effect, there must be an adequate cause. God is a spirit, thus he is outside of the law of cause and effect. Number 5.
Hey, Brad?
Laws require... Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay. I can't see you guys right now because my picture-in-picture is showing me my slides, so you guys will just have to holler out.
What if they were to come back and say, well, what's a spirit?
If they would ask me what is a spirit,
Yeah,
I would simply answer. I'd simply answer by saying it's something that cannot be measured using the scientific method.
All right.
There's a really cool study that was done by 2 guys that basically proved that the brain is different from the mind or the spirit. And that is, neurons firing, they make activity. But if somebody thinks about something or if there is basically if you're using your mind and you're not firing these neurons, it's 2 different activities. Well, they did a research experiment where they basically showed both. They showed both the mind working and the brain working. And it basically proved the idea of dualism, the fact that you've got a brain and a soul or a spirit. Proof number 5, laws require a lawgiver. James chapter 4, verse 12, there is one lawgiver who is able to save and to destroy. Somebody give me a law that we all recognize.
Gravity.
Absolutely. Gravity would definitely be one of them. What else? Law of...
Momentum.
How about momentum? So you got laws. We have physical laws that are in place that everybody recognizes. The question is, how did they get there? The answer is you have to have a lawgiver. Laws don't just literally happen by chance. Proof number 6 we've touched on, but I want to give you a better way of looking at it. We have a moral code. Where did it come from? Imagine visiting more than 10 different island populations completely isolated from one another, learning that they all possess laws regarding murder and adultery. Furthermore, each group viewed things like lying and stealing as wrong. Where did the independent groups come up with such a similar moral code? This was an actual experiment they did in the South Pacific, where they went to 10 different independent islands that did not communicate with each other. And they realized that those island natives had a very, very similar moral code. The idea being, Folks, we're not getting our moral code from individuals, because if you did, you would have 10 different moral codes on all those islands. We've adopted God's code, His unchanging nature. And therefore, things that are on the screen right now, we view those all as wrong or bad. Now, we touched on this, I think Jerry mentioned this last time we were together. The fact that our society is starting to wink at some of this stuff. Is it true that our society is loosening our moral code?
Yes.
Absolutely. But does that change the fact that we recognize things internally through our conscience and all as right or wrong?
No.
So here, this is something you think about. I had an atheist one time. He told me, he said, he tried to argue the fact that, you know, not everybody believes that there's moral absolute right and wrong. He said, you know, take for example somebody that's a criminal. He said they steal and they don't have a problem with that. So I asked him, I said, all right, if there's two of these guys and they're working and they go and they rob a bank, and one of those robbers decides he wants 80% of the loot, and he tells the other guy, I'm only going to give you 20%. Do you think that guy's cool with that? Even among thieves, they recognize the idea of right and wrong. You know, if two guys go in and do a job on a bank, they're going to want 50-50. So even though they may participate in bad behavior, even though they may do some of these things, that doesn't change the fact that, morally speaking, they still have a code. Now, as you look at that list for just a second, let's talk about something. How many of those are legalized right now? Or let me say this a different way. How many of those can we get away with in our legal system?
Abortion.
4.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, all of them.
Okay, which ones?
Got the right lawyer, you can get away with all of them.
Okay, we're going to say you have an average lawyer.
There you go.
Okay.
Let's see here.
Obviously, abortion
Abortion.
is legal.
Infanticide.
Okay.
And bestiality in some places, isn't it?
They're trying to legalize it in 2 states, yes.
You can close it.
California's probably.
Killing if
So as you-
we're not talking about murder.
Right.
As you look at that list, you realize our society is starting to weaken its moral code. Now, if I were to say, if I told you, I said, okay, homosexual behavior is leading to 2 of these, which 2 would you think?
Bestiality.
Pedophilia.
Yep. And here's the problem, guys. Here's what's happening in the United States, literally as we speak. Homosexuality, homosexual marriage has made a huge, tremendous growth in the last, 6 years? And just within the last year and a half, now the folks, NAMBA and some of these other groups, they are using the same argument, that argument of, hey, it's my right to be married to someone of the same sex or whatever. Now they're coming back and saying, hey, it's my right to be married to a 12-year-old boy. Or it's my right to have relations with an animal. They're trying to tie it to a civil right. Which, if you go back and you look at true civil rights and you look at homosexuality, there's nothing at all similar of those 2 different movements. When you know that homosexuality is not that you are not born with it, that it is a choice, folks, that's not a civil right. In fact, here's my thing that I often say from the pulpit. They're not wanting civil rights. They've already got those. They're wanting special rights.
Yeah.
They're wanting rights above and beyond what we already have. If they get that, then there's nothing to prevent somebody from coming right behind, riding their coattails and saying, it's my right to marry children or to marry a sheep or whatever kind of animal they use. I don't even know. All right. Any questions, comments? Only option that makes logical sense is that humans have adopted God's standard for right and wrong. True morality is based on the fact of God's unchanging nature. He is eternal, He is holy, He is just and righteous, He is forever consistent. Guys, one of the hardest writing assignments that I have ever done. I very foolishly one time agreed to write a magazine article, a Brotherhood article. Some folks asked me to write something. They said, hey, will you write about the nature of God? What all composes God? If you've never looked through the Bible at all the different characteristics of God, you know, who He is, how the Bible describes God, that list is almost endless. He is, you name it, He is everything. He is a jealous God. He is a long-suffering God. He is a holy God, a righteous God. He is a just God. All these different words. But the point being, all of those different characteristics add up to why His standard for right and wrong is what we've adopted. Psalm 119, verse 68, you're good, you do good, teach me your statutes. Proof number 7, communication requires a communicator. Why is that a big deal?
Well, we have all of these different languages. Where did they come from?
What if somebody says they evolved? You just evolved the ability to communicate. After all, parakeets can communicate and dolphins can communicate, and you got all these other animals that allegedly can communicate. What would you say to somebody that says that? I'm going to pull this out. What would you say to somebody that says that?
There has to be an original form of communication, doesn't there?
Okay, that's part of it. What else? Yeah, Jerry?
Well, why do dogs, if it evolved, well, I think about that. Because if it evolved, why do dogs still bark, but
That's a great question. Because you think about how much good comes from us being able to communicate. I mean, you think about how much further the human race has been able to go because we can communicate. But there's a phrase I'm looking for one of you to say that really kind of differentiates everything. Dean?
Would it be the ability to build on top of information?
Absolutely. That's what I'm looking for. The key is human beings can build on knowledge. You guys will be studying sermons and commentaries that were written by men long before you, and you'll be able to use their wisdom and stand on their shoulders. Animals, there is not an animal in the world that can do that. Now you think about it for just a moment. I can watch a video conferencing system that was put together by men, basically all the way from Edison to today, people who were fixing things, making it better all along the way. Well, lo and behold, here we are today. We can communicate in real time from Denver to Nashville, even though Edison had no idea that would be possible. There's not a bird or a cheetah or a monkey or anything in the world that can pass along that kind of information, that can build on knowledge like that. So when somebody tells me a parakeet or a dolphin can communicate, I simply ask them, can that parakeet or dolphin learn a task and then communicate that onto his offspring? Because that is true building of knowledge right there. It's one thing for a dolphin to take some rings and run through certain pathways and learn to do a certain task. It's totally different for that dolphin to then communicate to its offspring, hey, here's how you do it, here's why you do it, here's how you can do it better.
Because the human being is doing the training for that animal.
Absolutely.
They just can't do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey, Brad, I don't know if, I guess if I'm understanding correctly, because don't animals teach their offspring, for instance, how to hunt, how to make shelter?
Absolutely.
Isn't that a form of communication?
There's instinct.
Uh-huh.
So that, let me give you the perfect example. All birds, relatively, all birds know how to build a what?
Nest.
A nest. Okay. So you got sparrows, you got robins, you've got all these different birds that instinctively know how to build a nest. Dean, in order for this to be a building on of knowledge, you would have a sparrow that says, hey, here's how you build a nest. And he teaches it to his children. And the children say, hey, man, that's really cool. If we put a little tarp over the top of this, we'd stay dry. And then his grandchildren would say, yeah, you know what? And if we would put it in this location, we would stay warmer longer. And they keep evolving this thing, pardon the pun, until you've got like basically an indoor house for that bird to live in, to be able to walk into. It's got a flap to keep the elements off of it. Maybe it's got heating and air conditioning, whatever. No, birds are still in nests. They've been in nests for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Gotcha.
So that's simply an instinct that they are able to pass on. What is a mammalian instinct? What is an instinct of human beings that happens at birth that evolutionists cannot explain? Those of you who are fathers, think about it for just a minute. Absolutely, within 3 hours of that child being delivered into the world, it has already started a sucking reflex. Now, if the child doesn't know how to do that, what's going to happen to the child? It's going to die from hunger. And yet they all know how to do it. Yeah, there are a few that you have to show and you have to help along, but in the broad spectrum of humanity, everybody knows how to do that. Can you imagine an evolutionary sequence? How in the world do you evolve a sucking reflex, realizing that sucking reflex is necessary for your survival? The first baby or two that didn't evolve it, they're gone. You don't pass it on to the next generation because they're dead. All right. Let's flip our attention. Any questions at all about the material in the book on proving the existence of God? Chapter 3 deals with whether or not there's one God, a multitude of gods, or no God. And it looks at the fact that, even in the Bible there's a multitude of false gods that are given. On page 42 it says, not a problem in the past. Have you guys ever thought about the fact that it's only fairly recently that the whole idea of atheism is even an issue? Did Abraham ever have to prove God existed? No, why not?
He talked with God.
Talked with God. Did Moses have to prove that God existed? No, God spoke to him directly. You've got prophets all the way through the later part of the Old Testament who are still communicating directly with God. You've got Jesus, the Son of God, in the New Testament. So the whole idea of what we're doing right now, the exercise of having to be able to prove the existence of God, is a relatively new exercise in the history of mankind, because for a long, long period of time, everybody realized, they may not like it, they may not want it, but it was a pretty common ordeal. Yes, there is a God. Today, obviously, that's quite a bit different. Somebody give me the name of a god in the Bible. A false god. Who?
Dagon.
Dagon, okay. Who else? Baal. What were these false gods? Where did they come from primarily?
Someone's mind. I guess.
What do you mean? What was the purpose? Or
Yeah, well, what was their purpose and where did they come from?
they're like fertility gods, weren't they? They
Okay, some of them.
They wanted to have a mate so they'd have good crops and things like that. Same with Diana. Came from well, how can I say?
Now, some of that came from Greece.
Okay.
Some of it came from Greece. Some of it came obviously from what we're talking about here. But the concept is still the same, and that is that individuals decided to worship specific things or idols or man-made gods in order to better whatever circumstance they're in. What is a modern version of that?
Materialism.
Money.
What do people worship today?
Are you talking about specific religions?
Nope. I'm talking about if I asked you to point out idolatry at Bear Valley Church of Christ, what would you point to?
Okay.
Jared's looking at me like, what? Eric.
I think some people worship their jobs because you can see the people who are there Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night, and you can make a distinguishment
Okay.
between them.
I totally agree. What else?
Go ahead, Jerry.
No, you go.
Go ahead, Jerry.
Position, power, prestige, anything like that.
Absolutely. Dean?
It's a materialistic world. Things that, I don't know, cars and houses and big screen TVs and all that stuff. People, who was it? It was Dave Chamberlain this morning told us a story about a couple that he knew that had two BMWs but didn't have any furniture. They slept on mattresses because they couldn't afford furniture because they bought two BMWs.
Somebody, do you have your Bibles with you guys? Or do you have an online Bible you can get to? Somebody read me Colossians chapter 3, verse 5.
Therefore consider the members of your earthly body as dead to immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and greed, which amounts to idolatry.
Greed, which amounts to idolatry. The New King James says covetousness, which is idolatry. So now, if I came back and asked you, is there idol worship in Bear Valley? The answer would be, unfortunately, yeah. There are people who like name brand cars or name brand whatever so much that it actually it inhibits their relationship with God. Anytime you have something that is coming between you and God, that is called idolatry. So even though we've got past examples of Molech and Dagon and some of these false gods of eras ago, don't kid yourself and think that just because we're living in a modern time, don't have a little Buddha at our house, that we're not worshiping false gods. We still got idolatry going around today. Other questions, comments? What do you guys think the single problem is for people coming over to being a believer of God? What is one of the biggest stumbling blocks for mankind?
Pride.
Family?
Pride.
No pride.
Absolutely. And as you are studying with people, you're going to run into that so many times that it's not even funny. It just, even though mentally they may finally realize it, that pride is not going to allow them to take that next step. Let's do a real quick round the room kind of thing. We'll start with John, and John Warren's in the back. Let's say that you have a group here you've been studying with, and all of a sudden one of the guys looks at you and says, if I do that, that's going to mean my mom and my grandparents are in hell.
Are in where?
If I obey what you're saying, what would you say to them?
Okay. So I heard you say that we're in a study group, and someone says if I follow that, then I'm basically condemning my deceased parents, right, or family.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I would want to try to talk to them about how, I know you love your mother and your father who are deceased, and wouldn't they want you to do, if they were with you today, they were such good people, wouldn't they want you to do what was the right thing? Wouldn't they want you to do the right thing, if you could ask them that today? And hopefully his answer would be yes. My parents today, if they were here speaking to me, they would want me to do the right thing. And I would try to do my best to try to get him to separate himself from his decision to put on Christ as condemning his family, his mom and dad, deceased parents, because this is his decision. Just like his mom and dad had their own decision. This
Absolutely.
is his own decision.
Never forget to remind them they've got to stand in front of God alone. Not like they take mom, dad, grandparents, Aunt Ethel, babysitter, cousins, nobody with them. They're going to be there by themselves. So that's good, Paul. How would you tweak that some more? What would you throw in there?
If your parents are really suffering in hell, they don't want you to join them there.
Yeah.
Amen.
Okay.
I still have to work on that answer because I face it in my own family.
Oh, I do too. I've got some extended family members that I'm working on. So, do you ever try to preach their family out?
No.
Absolutely not.
I agree. Totally agree. Because if you water it down, guys, you have not done them or yourself any favors at all. If you try to say, well, we don't know for sure, and maybe they were good people, and blah, 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 blah. Basically, what you're doing is you're unraveling the foundation that you're going to need to eventually build on. And so, you have to allow them to come to that moment of, okay, this is a religion built on absolute truth. Absolute truth means that my family members didn't obey the gospel. There is a gospel. I can know the gospel. There's one way, only one way. Therefore, when I add all of this up, here's the answer that has to be right. What else? Anybody else? Comments?
Well, could you also work into that, just out of curiosity, the story of the rich man and Lazarus? Is there any way you
Absolutely.
could use that?
Absolutely. Yeah, guys, to me, that is the single occasion where God is peeling back the curtain and allowing us to view a little bit of what the future is going to be like. And you've got this rich man who's basically saying, please, somebody go tell my family members. And the response is, hey, they got the prophets. They didn't hear them. Why would they hear this? So there's a powerful. Yeah, Jerry, go ahead.
No. Well, I'm teaching a Bible class right now, and we've gotten to the point where I've said, you know what? I took them over to Luke chapter 6:46. I said, if you know much, you more stripes and less stripes. And I just said, guess what? You know enough now.
Oh yeah.
And I just kind of let them know. I said, it's good to teach Bible classes, but it's also dangerous if you don't obey.
Yep.
Because now you don't have any excuse.
One of the most powerful sermons I've ever heard. It's called and I'm sure you guys have probably heard a version of it. It's called the 3 calls for evangelism. The call from down under, the call from within, and the call from above. And the one from down under would be everybody who has died before, who is not a Christian, who didn't obey the gospel. It was basically saying, look, get out there and teach my family, please teach others so they won't fall into where we are today. So it's pretty powerful lesson. All right, any more questions, thoughts, comments before we move on to the next chapter? All right, what we're going to do is we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about what I think is probably the biggest club against Christians. Let me bring it up on the screen. And I'm going to let one of you guys talk to me for just a minute, see if that'll capture y'all. Dean, you're good at talking. Why don't you just talk?
How about those Titans?
Yeah. Thanks for the reminder. I appreciate it.
It's all right.
There we go. That worked. That worked that time. Very good. I appreciate you rubbing the salt in my wounds. I can at least see you. I'm going to flip through these slides. I'll back up and go slow because there's some points here that I don't want you to miss that I think you guys may be able to use as sermon material in the future. World is telling us that we can't know, that there is no absolute truth, that nothing is really black and white. For instance, we used to know murder was wrong, then we began calling it a choice. We used to know homosexuality was wrong, then we call it alternative lifestyle. We used to know the Bible was inspired, but even that has fallen under attack. Attacks on the truth are causing many to doubt and turn away. Without a doubt, this has found its way into the church. But to me, the biggest struggle is the first part we got right here, where it talks about evil, pain, and suffering. If you want to find out why people are atheists or why people have left the church or why people have turned away, more often than not, something has happened to them in their life personally, and that is why they turned away. How many of us have uttered that phrase? All of us. I mean, let's be honest, guys. I don't know of a human being. Now, maybe we don't say it physically. Maybe we don't bust out and say, why me, God? But in all reality, everybody has thought, we have a bad week, and let's say our car breaks down, and family members are sick, and maybe our job is not as steady as we thought it was, or we get a bill that we weren't expecting, or whatever, and all of a sudden the things just keep adding up, and it's like, come on, why me, God? The one thing that you need to make sure you counsel when you talk to other people about this is the fact that we are not alone in asking that question. That question has been asked by men long before we were ever born. King David asked, why do you stand afar off, O Lord? Why do you hide in times of trouble? Israelite Gideon lamented, he said, oh my Lord, if Jehovah's with us, why then has all of this happened to us? So we have clear examples, biblical examples, of men asking that question, which tells me, number one, it tells me that's not sinful for me to sit there and think to myself, why is this happening to me? What could be sinful is how I react to it, how I behave around it. So here's the appeal. Everybody's probably heard this. If there really is a God, why do bad things happen to good people? In fact, there's a very, very well-known book with basically that title that has sold gazillions of copies. Why bad things happen to good people? Evolutionists, they'll phrase it this way. If God is a loving God, then why do bad things happen to good people? Guys, I cannot stress to you enough, this is going to be the one breaking point for many of the people who you deal with on a week-by-week basis that interferes with their relationship with God. Out of everything that I've ever seen, the existence of evil, pain, and suffering is the one that they have the biggest trouble with. In fact, I think it's Hitchens, Christopher Hitchens or Richard Dawkins one. He makes the comment, he said, how can a sane person walk through a children's hospital and believe in a loving God? That's a powerful argument. It doesn't hold up under scrutiny, but that people can relate to that because all of us have had things happen to us. You think about what's going on in the world around us. You know, I'm not going to do this. We could because it's a smaller class. But if I went around the room and said, okay, tell me some of the tragedies that you've experienced in your lifetime. I suspect everybody in there has maybe felt death of a family member. Maybe you have felt loss either through fire, flood, through you name it. We all know folks who have been diagnosed with cancer or who have lost loved ones from that. In this particular era, you guys are the lucky ones. You don't get pink slips because you're in preaching school, but you probably know people who've lost their jobs. So the appeal is very, very real. And it is so real that it is the one thing that atheists love to use against us. They rationalize it this way. If God can prevent evil, but he won't, then he is not good. Or if he wants to prevent evil, but he can't, then he's not all-powerful. Let me encourage you to remember that phrase right there. That if he can prevent evil but he won't, then he's not good. If he wants to prevent evil but can't, he's not all powerful. Because that is the way they set up this argument. What's the problem with that?
God made us free moral agents.
Bingo. Absolutely. In fact, my next slide, boom. He loved us enough that he created every single one of us with free will. But with that free will comes responsibility. Now, Eric, could God have made it where every single person on this planet had to worship him on a Sunday morning?
He could have.
Absolutely. He could have basically programmed us to where when Sunday rolls around, automatically we start heading for a church building. Could he have made it where, I mean, you name it. He could have set the equation up however he wanted, but he wants people who worship him out of a free will, free spirit. People will gather together, sing praises to him out of the love of their heart. There's a Psalm 32, verse 9 that I like that kind of goes along with this in a way. King David said, "Do not be like the horse or like the mule, which have no understanding, which must be harnessed with bit and bridle, else they will not come near you." The point is, God is never going to force anybody to obey him. Now, does he want you to obey him? Absolutely. Did he expect Adam and Eve to obey him in the garden? Absolutely he did. But did he allow them free will? Yep. So, point number one, if I'm talking to somebody about evil, pain, and suffering, whether I'm going to preach a sermon on it, whether I'm sitting across my desk and I'm counseling a couple that has just lost a child, the very first thing that I say is, okay, we're going to look at some reasons why God would allow this, but there's two things that I need to make sure you fully understand. The first is God created man with free will. And the second is that God is not a respecter of persons. Acts chapter 10, verse 34 reveals that very clearly. What does that mean, though, in just plain Jane terms? What does that mean?
It doesn't matter your status. Everyone's going to answer in the same way for their actions.
Absolutely. And ultimately, if you think about it for just a minute, everybody's going to answer for their actions. So here we've got God is not a respecter of persons. We've got text that says he makes the rain to fall on the fields of the what and the what?
Just and the unjust.
The just and the unjust. So we've got biblical example of what I'm talking about. Those two things are gonna basically play a large role into where we're going with this whole thing. Any questions so far?
Yeah, was that the New King James Version you were quoting there?
Hey man, New King James, that's what Jesus carried.
All right, just checking. That's for Dean's benefit.
Come on now.
I think Wayne's kind of
I'll be honest, guys. I do carry a New King James just because traveling all over the United States, that is the one version that I think does not get.
He said New King James. He didn't say King
Yes, I
James.
did. That doesn't catch the heat that some of the other versions might. My wife studies from a New American Standard,
That way.
and I've got an ESV as well that is, I think, a very good translation. But anyway, if you're a King James guy, you're all right by me.
Amen, brother. Thanks for saying it out loud. Need a little help.
Hey, you forget, I spent 5 years in Montgomery, Alabama,
Oh, yeah.
and there's a lot of people in Montgomery who still drive around with bumper stickers that say, if it ain't KJV 1611, it ain't Bible.
Yes, sir.
That's his
All right. Hey, I wanna stop right here. We're gonna let me go to the next slide. We're gonna look at 5 reasons why God allows suffering. But I wanna pause right here and I wanna share something with you guys for just a second. How many of you have heard in the news in the last 2 weeks about a young lady who left Planned Parenthood and is now I'm going to pull that out. She left Planned Parenthood and she is now working pro-life, Coalition for Life. You know what I'm talking about? John's heard about it?
Yeah.
Anybody else?
That's awesome.
I had the chance to interview her today. Her name is Abby Johnson. And I've done, for the magazine, I've done just a tremendous amount of interviews with people. By far, this was the most amazing interview I've ever conducted in my life. Because she basically walked me back behind the doors of Planned Parenthood and shared with me some of the things that were going on. When you talk about evil, pain, and suffering, guys, it doesn't get any worse than this. She told me, she said 6 months ago, they came to her. She was working in the family planning side of Planned Parenthood. They came to her and they said, hey, Abby, the economy is down. Our revenue is way down. We don't make anything on family planning. Where we really get our money is abortions. We need you to focus your energy to get more abortions.
See, that's
Yeah. This, just to give you guys the full story, this is the lady who, she was holding an ultrasound wand while a doctor was performing an abortion. And so she saw on the screen a full profile of this infant, 13 weeks old, fully developed legs, arms, everything. She said, I physically saw the doctor go in. He tapped the baby twice with this cannula. It's a suction cannula. And the baby reacted and started moving and trying to physically get away from it. And then they turned on the suction. And she said, I just watched. She said, I literally, the last thing I remember was seeing the baby's spinal cord wrap around and suck through the cannula.
oh.
And that was the day, literally, that she left them and is now pro-life. Like I said, it was one of the most phenomenal interviews I've ever done. But anyway,
Brad,
I did want to share that with you, just because those are the kind of things that, to me, we need to be in the church. We need to have on the front page of bulletins, because it's so easy to get desensitized to some of this stuff. Dean, how old are you?
22.
Oh, man, you're just a young pup. Abortion's been alive his entire life. Eric, you're 23?
22.
Jerry, how old are you?
45, sir.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Hey, what you trying to say?
I'll say this: it's been legal pretty much every year except maybe one or two of my existence. So that tells you how long abortion's been around in our country.
It's terrible.
It is. All right, let's look at why God would allow suffering. Number one, some of the suffering is our own fault. See, you guys weren't talking. I can't see you right now. Hold on, we're gonna restart it because it's so much easier on me. All right, I'm gonna let somebody say something over there. Hold on.
Hope the
Dean,
Titans win the Super Bowl.
Now you're getting better.
Hey.
Yeah, he kicked out. Oh, goodness.
Okay, you guys give me an example of this one. Paul, what's an example of some of the suffering being our own fault?
Substance abuse.
Okay, great, good example. So if I go out and I get hooked on methamphetamine, and it causes me to lose my front teeth and become addicted and lose my family and my job, some of that's my own fault. What else? Somebody else. John, what's another example?
Adultery?
Absolutely. We've had a rash of that lately in the news. Folks, I mean, let's be honest. That's the tentacles for something like adultery go very, very deep. And so when your whole world comes apart, ultimately you have expressed your free will that God gave you in a bad way. Jerry, you got any more?
That's all I can think of right now.
Okay. I put on here, teenage girls become pregnant out of wedlock due to poor decisions, lack of willpower. And here's the thing, even if a young lady doesn't get pregnant, there are still going to be emotional scars that she may be dealing with for a very long time after that. So some of the suffering around us today is very, very much whose fault? Our own. Now, as this would kind of be considered 1B. This is a subset of this first one. Some of the suffering is from our own covetousness. So some of it is our fault in that the decisions that we make, that we go out, we drink, or we go out, we do drugs, or we do bad things, that is going to hurt us directly. But there is also suffering of other human beings because we are covetous. And by that I mean, right now the current research shows that even though we say we give 10% of our income, we're really only giving about 3 or 4 in the church. And you think, if we really did give 10 or 12 or 15% of our income, think about how much more good the church could do for people who are hungry, people who don't have housing, people who are sick. I mean, not to, hammer the point, but we wouldn't have to worry about national health care plan, because if Christians really did give like we say we give, we'd be able to help take care of people. So some of the suffering, when we see those horrible commercials from third world countries where children are starving, obviously we go through several different questions in our mind. If I give to them, is it really going to go to the kids? Is it going to an organization? Yada, yada, yada. But the bottom line is, if Christians really did give, then a lot of that suffering would go away. I asked the first year students this, and I'm going to ask you guys as well. What is your response when you come across somebody holding a sign? It says something to the effect of,
Not real.
you know, hungry, thank you, God bless. What do you do? What's your reaction to that?
A person's lazy, doesn't want to go get a job. Is a scam artist.
Okay? And most of them are, guys. I mean, let's be honest. Do you ever give them money? Do you give them food? What do you do?
I have given them money and food, and if I pass them by, I usually wind up feeling a little twinge of guilt for passing them by. But then on the other hand, for people that are homeless, and some of them have the neatest lettered signs. I thought, these guys are graphic artists. Why are they sitting out here on the curb?
Oh, they got to be able to reuse it tomorrow. Jerry, what do you do?
A lot of them are mentally ill.
Yes.
A lot of them are mentally ill. A lot of them are ex-vets, Vietnam vets. A lot of them have substance abuse. So, you know, I used to work with homeless a lot, and it really depends on the day. If I see a guy there every week for a month, I'm like, okay, this is his job. I guess it's at work. Sometimes I give him money, sometimes I food, sometimes I give him water, and sometimes I don't give him anything. But, you know, I've learned from working with him not to judge too quickly, because you don't know.
Right.
And some of them are lazy, you know, and just don't want to work. So you never know.
I tell you what we do with it, you know, because we've got 4 small kids, and they watch, you know, children are very perceptive. When they see somebody like that holding a sign that says, you know, please help or whatever, they're watching their parents. How does mom and dad treat that person? And so what Melinda and I have tried to start doing is we'll carry, you know, like those little peanut butter crackers that come into a 6-pack. You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
You can buy those at Sam's really cheap, really easy. Load up your car with them, and when you see somebody, you know, basically you hand them out the window. And if that person really is hungry and they cannot physically take care of themselves, you've just helped feed them. If they're scam artists, you at least haven't given them money to go buy booze or drugs or whatever. So that's kind of how we approach it. Any other comments, thoughts before we leave the covetousness problem? Number 2, we like it a whole lot better. Some of the suffering comes from past generations. Give me an example of this one, Eric.
Biblical or just what's going on now?
Yeah, what's going on now? It's fine.
Well, I think even in the war, we can look at what the perception of what happened in Vietnam, and now we have people kind of relating the war now to Vietnam, and now our troops are being looked down upon for kind of doing the same thing. I see them as suffering in that way.
Okay, good point. Very good point. I'll give you another flip of that. Most of you guys know that when the Vietnam vets went over, they had trouble with seeing through the foliage over there. It was very dense jungles when they were fighting. So we came up with Agent Orange that kills vegetation very effectively, very quickly. They would spray it from planes, airplanes, because the snipers, the Viet Cong, were up in trees, and they would basically sit up there and wait until our troops would come out, and they'd shoot them, pick them off one by one. So planes come overhead, they spray this stuff that was tinted orange, that's how it got its name, and it did a phenomenal job of killing foliage. But it also mutated DNA. And so when a lot of these guys came back and were starting families, some of their children were born with problems, and now that generation of Vietnam vets is suffering from all kinds of degenerative disorders because they were also on the ground getting sprayed when this stuff comes over. And so you've got now Vietnam vets who are suffering from what's called nervous Parkinson's or neuronal Parkinson's, which is directly related to this chemical they were spraying. You got men who are having strokes because of it. You've got all these different things that are directly, it's suffering because of decisions we made in the past. What's some other examples?
Going back to that substance abuse issue, my wife has worked in special education with young children, and you see the effects through several generations of the choices that their parents have made. And beyond that, even sins, sexual sins and those kind of things. Those, while the guilt does not pass on to the children, the consequences of that can pass on through several generations.
Absolutely. Absolutely it does. Yep. Hey guys, what we're talking about here, these are real life, everyday, every congregation kinds of problems. I seriously doubt that everybody in that room knows of all of the problems that are going on at Bear Valley, things that individuals are struggling with, suffering from, a lot of which came from past generations. Whether it be sexual sins, whether it be, think about how many cancers we know of today that people have that are from substances that back then we didn't think were that bad. Let's face it, folks, the generation of the 50s and 60s, what did they all roll up in their T-shirt sleeve? Cigarettes. Not a big deal. You look at things like some of the additives that we've used or some of the drugs that are put on the market, it kind of cracks me up. It seems like almost every single weight loss drug they put out there for 3 or 4 months or maybe even 2 or 3 years, lo and behold, then they find out it messes up your mitral valves or it causes strokes or it does whatever. And it over and over we're having to pull all these things off the shelf. But there again, the point is we've got people who are suffering, really, truly suffering because of decisions made from past generations.
Hey, Brad.
Somebody had yeah.
Sorry. What is the third one on that list?
Asbestos.
Yeah. What is that?
Oh, you already know.
Dude, where have you been living?
I've never heard of that.
Somebody needs to get him out of the cave that he is in. Bless his heart. Asbestos is we actually used it as an insulator. Thought it was a great insulator, especially it was cheap, it was easy to come by, and you could actually spray it on in many situations. So they were filling buildings, they were filling schools with it. So you think of it this way, if you tear down the drywall in some of these places or the ceiling, you look and there's this substance that is there. It's called asbestos. We now know asbestos causes cancer in a big way. And in fact, if you try to tear it out of those schools or bring it out of the buildings, that makes it even worse because now you got asbestos dust, and it's the dust gets in your lungs and causes cancer, et cetera, et cetera. So that is, for those who clue into the news every once in a while, that's a huge thing.
Going much further back than that, it was in just a huge range of products. Flooring and the siding on the outside of houses.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Same thing with lead paint, too. Lead paint was in everything. I can still to this day remember going with my dad. It was the first house we painted when I was little, And there were only two kind of paints, and there was a lead-based paint, and I think it was I don't even remember now what he called it. It was a oil or acrylic or something, but lead was the one everybody was going with because it would last for eons. And you put it on something, and it's going to be there forever and ever. Of course, it also has lead, which causes problems. You guys may watch the news these days and see some of these news warnings about toys are coming out right now saying, hey, this toy may be harmful because it's got high quantities of lead or chromium or something in it that has been found to be dangerous for children. Well, this is exactly what we're talking about. It's real to people. Give me aside from the abortion debate, give me a past government decision that could cause evil pain or suffering.
I hate to say it, but as good as it is, even integration.
Yeah? Okay. Tell me what you mean by that.
Well, you have your black and white schools, but then you have them integrating, and quite frankly, blacks and whites didn't like it. So you had these race wars going on with chains and bats in schools.
Yep.
Just wasn't a pretty picture.
That's a very good point.
Free speech.
Free speech? How is that how's that a problem?
I want to hear this.
Anything is allowed as far as free speech goes. It is opening
yeah.
the doors for the porn industry.
That's true. That is true.
Which just degrades anybody anymore. But
well, some of that is because we've lost common sense too.
right.
I mean, when you're able to petition the court and say that the porn industry is freedom of speech versus a porn industry that's wanting to make billions of dollars, or when you say that some nasty kind of art is art and not porn or not child porn or whatever, to me that's just foolish lack of common sense.
Yeah.
But you guys, you get the picture. Some of the stuff that we are suffering with today. Here's one, and I'll we kind of joke about this. You realize that our grandparents did not always have to pay an income tax. Now, every April the 15th, what happens in America? People get stressed out. Think about how many. Say that again.
I'm old enough to know about that one.
Are you?
Yeah.
People get stressed out, and people have to spend lots of time, energy, money in order to figure out, to go through this massive tax code that was written basically for the purpose of people not to understand it, send the government money because of a decision that was made many, many, many moons ago. So there are things out there that, we are contending with today. The third one, some suffering comes because of natural laws that have been in effect since creation. This is probably the one that you'll struggle with the most with a parent who, maybe somebody that loses a child. I'll give you a prime example. If you ever get to Lubbock, Texas, there's a congregation there called Green Lawn. And Green Lawn had a group of kids go on basically it was like a youth rally. They had about 60 kids go. They went down in church vans, 15-passenger vans. On the way back, there was a vehicle that was pulling one of these little carts, trailer kind of things. And the guy had not clamped the trailer fully down on the ball, and it came off going about 70 miles an hour. And it basically became a projectile, hit one of those church vans. Church van flipped, rolled down an embankment, and I think it ended up killing like 9 or 11 of the girls that were in there. That however you want to cut it, folks, that is suffering. That's horrible. That's horrendous. You're talking about a group that had gone somewhere to learn more about God, and on their way back, 11 of them lose their lives. That's horrible. But the reason behind it has to do with these natural laws that have been in effect. And that would be things like the laws of momentum, the laws of gravity that God put into effect during the creation week. So I often give the example. I say, okay, if me and my children went up to the top of this particular mountain, and we're up there and we look around and we see it's amazing, and so we want to worship and praise God. And one of my children backs up just a little bit too far. He goes over the edge. Does that mean that God doesn't love me or my children?
No.
Absolutely not. That has nothing to do with God's love for mankind. It's simply that gravity, which has been in effect since the creation week, is going to bring about that child's death. Same thing I put on the screen, you'll see it says if a boy steps in front of a moving freight train or a bus, the momentum of the train is likely going to kill him. If you've got a 4 or 5 year old that steps in front of a bus going 60 miles an hour, that's not good. But does it affect how God loves us? Absolutely not. Because God's love for us is the same. Now, let's pause right here for just a second. Let me ask each one of you. Could Jehovah God save my child from falling off of that mountain?
Yes.
Absolutely he could. If you don't believe that, you don't believe God is all powerful. You got bigger problems. Why doesn't he?
That'd make him respect of persons, maybe.
If he saves my child, what does he have to do?
Save everybody's child that's in that situation.
He got to save every child that falls off a high point.
Violate his laws.
Exactly. He would have to suspend the very laws that he has put in place. Now, let's say he suspends the law of gravity. You guys are studying at Bear Valley in Denver, and you got an exam coming up, and it's in this Christian evidence class, and you heard it's going to be really, really, really hard. And so you're trying to study for it, and all of a sudden somebody in Wyoming falls from a high place. God suspends the law of gravity. Your books come floating up in the air. A few seconds later, they fall all over the place. So you spend the next 5 minutes, you're picking up your books and your notes, and then somebody in China falls from a high place. And God suspends the law of gravity. Guys, that would argue more against the existence of God, because that would be chaos. That would mean that literally you don't know when stuff's going to start floating around. You wouldn't be able to plan anything. It would be insanity, literally. There is a passage that I want somebody to read. Who's got a Bible? Luke chapter 13. Somebody back up and start in verse 1 and read through verse 5.
Now on the same occasion there were some present who reported to him about the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mixed with their sacrifices. And Jesus said to them, "Do you suppose that these Galileans were greater sinners than all other Galileans because they suffered this fate? I tell you no, but unless you repent, you will all likewise perish." How far do you want to go?
Through 5.
All right. Or do you suppose that those 18 on whom the tower in Siloam fell and killed them were worse culprits than all the men who live in Jerusalem? I tell you no, but unless you repent, you will all likewise perish.
Okay, so there was a tower that had fallen that was so well known, all Jesus had to do was remind him of it. Tower falls over, it kills 18 people. Now guys, think about that for just a minute. That would be very similar to something happening in the United States where I basically mention it, and you guys instantly recognize the tragedy that I'm talking about. He says, what about the Tower of Siloam? Killed 18 people. And then he goes on to make sure they understand these people did not die because of something they did. Why did they die? Ultimately, guys, they died because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Because nature took that tower that was falling over and it put it on top of them. Does that make sense? He is trying to make sure these people understand they didn't have this happen because they were more sinful. That's not the case. The case is these guys were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And look how he addresses both situations with the blood, the mingled blood, and the tower. He ends it up by saying basically this. Hey, you don't know when your ticket's going to be punched. You better get your life right too. Repent. All right. Any questions, comments on that one?
Hey, Brad, I've got a question.
Sure.
You talked about how if God suspended the laws which he created, it would be chaos. But at the same time, Jesus, who was God, suspended the laws to prove himself. So how can we have both God saying that God is going to suspend the laws and that be chaos, but at the same time God suspend the laws and it not be chaos?
Did Jesus suspend the law of gravity or momentum?
No.
No. Jesus performed miracles locally. I.e., he walked on water. He turned two fish. He turned the loaves and the fish into basketfuls. He healed people. But did he take these naturalistic laws that we're talking about and suspend them for all of mankind?
No.
No. That make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Number 4. Another reason why God would allow suffering, some of it is beneficial. Give me an example of that one.
Maybe something like chicken pox. You get it once as a child, perhaps, and then and then when your child gets it, you can still take care of them and not worry about getting it.
Okay. What else? You're right. You're absolutely right.
Because the Spirit can work all things for good. There are instances of suffering where people's lives have been radically changed in response to that suffering.
Very good.
The congregation I came from in Idaho just had an 18-year-old girl a few weeks ago that was just in a freak auto accident killed. Several people have come to Christ since then, and many lives have been restored because of that situation.
Absolutely.
It helps us.
Go ahead.
Well, it helps us, I guess, counsel people, because if we don't go through trials and tribulations as Christians, then as preachers, how in the world are we going to be able to, if someone comes to us and say, hey, I've got such and such problem, and if we've never gone through something like that or something similar, we can't help that person.
Right, absolutely. Guys, I'm going to put my this contact page up on the board while you guys are at break so you can see it, but we'll be back in just a few minutes.
I need to get out of my cave.
You just hassle me about the King James again? I'm just going to say Brad Harrub.
He uses the new.
Handle that. Handle that. No. Put it me.
huge mess.
Thank you, Brad.
A lot of people.
Thank you, guys. Hey, I would add this. Checkmate. Oh.
Check with. How's Joe Wells and Aaron doing?
Joe is actually right down the hall if you want me to pull his ugly face in here.
Oh, that's all
I
right.
can-
We were on the email with Aaron the other night. She came from the same congregation I'm from.
Is that in, you talking about the one in Meridianville?
Yeah, you're going to be there.
Yeah.
aren't you? Yeah.
Yes.
Good fun.
Hey, Brad,
Yes, sir.
did you ever get a chance to answer my email?
I have not yet.
All right,
Working on it.
good to go.
I'm gonna have.
I did tell you yay to the mutations though.
Yes, you did.
All right, let me put this up here.
I'm gonna have to hang up on you and restart this, Brad.
Okay, if I leave this up like that, will it be there when you?
You know, I'm not sure. When we go into record, we may have to restart it, but let's try it and find out.
Okay, I just need them to have that FTP site.
Okay. And I'll get back to you.